You'd never imagine the price a boss can pay for denying overtime to a single mother in the United States. Someone like me. My name is Jessica Williams, and every morning, while it's still dark outside, I quietly slip out of bed in our small apartment on the outskirts of the city. I'm not just a mom. I'm also a dad, a provider, a protector. I'm my daughter Emily's whole world. My ex-husband disappeared years ago, so it's just me making sure every bill is paid and Emily never goes without. That's why I say yes to every sleepless night, every extra hour at the accounting office. Even if it means missing bedtime stories or never showing up at Emily's school plays, I do what I can, because every penny matters to us. For months, I've stayed late after everyone else, finishing reports, filing documents, keeping track of every single extra shift. All those hours sacrificed, just so we could stay afloat. People at work probably see me as tough, maybe even tireless. But my boss, Richard Baker? He's cold, sarcastic, the kind of man who jokes about single mothers in the hallway and barely makes eye contact unless he's criticizing you. Around him, I always felt invisible, or worse, replaceable. Still, I kept going for Emily, hiding my anxiety behind a tired smile. But the day I checked my bank account and saw that none of my overtime had ever been paid, my world collapsed. I had missed birthdays, holidays, every little extra, just to keep us afloat, and all that work was erased. Just like that. I finally gathered the courage to confront Mr. Baker. He looked at me and smirked. You should be grateful you have a job. Plenty of people would take your place. The pressure nearly crushed me, rent overdue, bills stacking up, and worst of all, I started seeing the worry written all over Emily's little face. I felt defeated. But deep down, I knew I couldn't let this injustice win. That's when something fierce awakened inside me. I decided to fight, because sometimes, fate has a way of flipping even the darkest stories upside down. And what happened next? No one who hears my story will ever see injustice the same way again. When my alarm goes off at 5:30 every morning, it feels like the world is still asleep, except for me. I get out of my creaky bed as quietly as possible, careful not to wake Emily, my 7-year-old daughter, curled up under her faded pink blanket. I tiptoe to the kitchen, where our small, cold apartment greets me with a draft that somehow finds its way through every window, no matter how many blankets I hang up to block it out. I start preparing Emily's breakfast, warm up her milk, and try to ignore the growing worry about whether we'll have enough groceries to make it to Friday. This is our life, a small world of just the two of us, tucked away on the outskirts of a city that never truly welcomes you unless you can keep up. Emily's father hasn't been around in years. Child support was an empty promise from the start, so I've become everything to her: mother, father, provider, protector. Some weeks, it feels like every penny has to be stretched and prayed over just to cover the rent, bus fare, and school shoes that suddenly no longer fit overnight. As soon as Emily is ready for school, I bundle her up in her little jacket, and we face the cold morning together, her tiny hand clinging to mine as we wait at the corner for the city bus. After seeing her off safely, it's my turn. I join the line of exhausted commuters heading to the downtown office building, where I work as a secretary at a large accounting firm. Inside, the world runs on stress, ringing phones, looming deadlines, everyone rushing because even the smallest mistake can cost you your job. That's especially true when your boss is Richard Baker, the kind of man whose gaze never seems to soften and who demands perfection without mercy. Working here means never letting your guard down, not if you want to keep the job that keeps the lights on at home. This is the world I wake up to every day. It's exhausting, sometimes relentless, but I do it all for Emily. She is my reason to keep going, even on mornings when I wish I could crawl back into bed and hide from everything. If you're ready to walk this journey with me and witness how courage can turn even the darkest moments around, please stay until the very end of this powerful story of karma and justice. Your support means the world, so please subscribe and give this video a like to help bring more stories like this to life. And from my heart to yours, tell me where you're watching from, your city and country, in the comments below. I'd love to feel connected to you as we share this moment together. If you ever walked the halls of our accounting firm, you would immediately know when Richard Baker was near. He's a tall man, so tall that his presence seems to suck the air out of a room before he even opens his mouth. He is always impeccably dressed, a perfectly tailored suit, his tie always perfectly in place, shoes shining so much you'd think humiliating his subordinates gave him extra time to polish them. But what people really notice are his eyes, cold, pale, never warmed by a genuine smile. They say the only thing colder than his gaze is the office refrigerator, and even that's debatable. He never raises his voice, not that he needs to. There's something about the way he carries himself, how he looks down at you over the rims of his glasses, that makes you wish you were invisible. To Richard Baker, everyone is on borrowed time. He's the kind of boss who never gives praise, not even a passing good job. Mistakes, however, those never go unnoticed. One wrong decimal place, a typo in a spreadsheet, and he'll summon you to his office with nothing more than a curt email titled "Immediate Attention Required." That can ruin your whole day, a single phrase hanging over you, cold and final, until you finally enter his glass-walled office, where every word seems to build or destroy your future. He has a way of speaking, slow, deliberate, that twists the knife without spilling blood. Once, after I volunteered to help with a delayed project and made a numerical error, he waited until everyone was around at the team's morning meeting to address it. "Jessica, maybe we need someone a bit more attentive with these files. People distracted by personal issues tend to miss the details." The personal issues were only mentioned when I was nearby, his subtle way of reminding everyone I was the single mother, as if that explained everything: my tiredness, my need for overtime, my vulnerability. Richard Baker never forgets an offense. If someone objects, asks for a deserved raise, requests time off to care for a sick child, he makes sure they regret it. Not with open threats, but with impossible workloads, silent stares, or sudden exclusion from important projects. I used to tell myself it was just work pressure, that all bosses were tough, but I quickly learned otherwise. With him, it was personal. Rumors circulated in the break room long after he left, stories of how he sabotaged people's careers over minor infractions, of employees who left crying, especially women who felt Baker watched them more closely, doubted them more openly, mocked them more cruelly. "No one," he often said, "is irreplaceable. This is business, not a support group." Everyone knew the rules. Don't show weakness, don't ask questions, don't make mistakes, and above all, don't piss off Baker. I learned fast that if I wanted to keep that job, and keep food on Emily's table, I had to work twice as hard. Every unreasonable demand Baker made, I accepted. "Can you stay late, Jessica?" "Of course." "Do these reports?" "Absolutely." "Cover someone else's shift?" "Yes." There were nights I left the office after midnight, trembling beside the bus stop, phone in hand to video call Emily's grandmother and say goodnight to my daughter. I missed school events, birthday dinners, weekends at the park, sacrificing memories just to keep up with Baker's constant and exhausting demands. Sometimes, deep down, I secretly hoped my effort would change something. that somewhere behind that icy gaze, Baker would notice how hard I was trying and maybe, just this once, cut me some slack. But that never happened. The more I gave, the more he wanted. Any sign of me cracking under pressure, a late medical appointment for Emily, a yawn in the morning meeting, became ammunition for Baker, proof that I wasn't good enough, that I wasn't committed enough. It wasn't just me. I saw him tear others down too, especially women. Quiet remarks about work-life balance were met with cold laughter. Jokes about how single mothers always expect special treatment slipped discreetly into conversations, making everyone uncomfortable and leaving me feeling exposed, as if he were daring me to fight back so he could tear me down. Every sneer, every sarcastic comment chipped away at my dignity. But quitting wasn't an option. Not for me, not while Emily depended on me for everything. There were days, I admit, when I questioned whether enduring Baker was worth the emotional toll. I'd look in the mirror and barely recognize the woman staring back, tired, anxious, her energy drained by endless stress. But like every mother weary from battles, I persisted. Baker's voice became a constant buzzing in my mind, reminding me how disposable I was. Still, I clung to the hope that my sacrifices would one day be worth it, that someday, somewhere, all these sleepless nights and endless concessions would mean a life worth living for my daughter. Richard Baker became not just my boss but my shadow, always lurking, always judging, always one step ahead. He was the force that made every triumph harder to enjoy and every mistake feel like disaster. I needed every ounce of strength I had to face him. But if I've learned one thing being a single mother, it's that resilience can be born from the worst adversity. And, as Baker would soon find out, no one is truly irreplaceable, especially when justice finally comes knocking at your door. If someone had told me that working late, missing family dinners, and giving up weekends would lead to nothing, I don't know if I would have believed them. Back then, I wanted so badly to believe that hard work meant something, that it was noticed, even if not always appreciated. For months, I did everything Richard Baker asked and more, watching the office lights go out one by one as I typed into the night. I documented everything, 60 overtime hours, logged and verified. Precious time I could never get back with Emily. But I kept telling myself it would pay off soon. I needed to believe that. But one night, while paying bills at the cracked kitchen table, I realized my paycheck was the same as always. A tightness rose in my chest. I grabbed my work log, double-checked my hours, scanned the digital time cards. Month after month, not a single minute of overtime had been paid. My stomach turned. 60 hours wasn't just a number to me. It was overdue rent, Emily's winter coat, groceries for another week. The next day, I tried to push the fear aside. I waited until the hallway was empty and knocked on Baker's office door. He looked up, his expression as blank as ever. "Yes, Jessica?" My hands were shaking, but I forced myself to speak. I just wanted to ask about my overtime. I've been logging extra hours for a few months, but they're not showing up in my paychecks. Is there an error in payroll? For a moment, he said nothing. Then a slow, ironic smile spread across his face. "Jessica, you should be grateful to even have a job here. We're cutting costs, and I'm still letting people like you stay. You really want to start asking for more?" I tried to keep my voice steady. "I'm not asking for more, sir. I'm just requesting what I'm owed. I can show you my logs, emails. The law says." He cut me off before I could finish. The law. So you're a legal expert now? Baker's stare turned icy. Let me give you some advice. Don't start making trouble, or you might find yourself out there with the rest of the people dying for a job like yours. You really think I can't find a dozen people to replace you tomorrow? His words stung, but what came after hurt even more. In the weeks that followed, the subtle punishments began. My task list doubled overnight. Projects that used to be team-based were suddenly assigned only to me. Baker started calling me out in meetings. Jessica, why isn't this done yet? Jessica, I expected more focus from someone with your circumstances. Sometimes he'd make biting comments right after I mentioned picking up Emily from school, flashing a smirk at colleagues, as if we were all in on some private joke about how single moms were scattered and unreliable. He started sending extra tasks just minutes before the day ended, knowing I'd be late picking up Emily, knowing how desperate I was to keep that job. The email alerts came faster than I could read them. Urgent. Required. Jessica, come see me now. I felt like I was drowning, gasping for air, while Baker kept his boot on my neck, pressing down a little more every day. When I tried again, this time with printed emails and labor law policies from the Department of Labor's website, he barely hid his irritation. If you're unhappy here, the door's right there, he said, not even lowering his voice. It's not easy getting hired when you're carrying all that baggage, huh, Jessica? The word baggage echoed in my ears long after I left his office, my cheeks burning with humiliation. The office became unbearable. Coworkers stopped looking me in the eye, afraid they'd be next. Minor mistakes were blown out of proportion. I began second-guessing everything: how I dressed, what time I arrived, how many times I went to the bathroom. Most of my energy went into simply not giving Baker more ammunition. The nights got longer. I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, worry gnawing at me, trying not to wake Emily as silent tears rolled down my face. On the hardest days, quitting felt like the only option. I'd pick up my phone, thumb hovering over job application forms, even knowing that most places wouldn't give a chance to a single mother with my spotty record of lateness and absences. But I always ended up in Emily's room, watching her sleep. She'd hold my finger in her tiny hand even in her dreams, as if she knew I needed something, anything, to keep going. And every time I thought I couldn't face another day in Baker's office, it was Emily, her hope, her need, that gave me just enough strength to try again. The injustice twisted inside me. I felt invisible and powerless, but leaving wasn't a luxury I could afford. Every cold interaction with Baker shook my resolve, but I refused to let him break me completely. At the very least, I owed that fight to Emily. I clung to the belief that no one, should be allowed to treat another human being with such cruelty just because they hold the power. In my darkest moment, the only thing I had left was stubborn hope. Sometimes, that's all you can hold on to, until the story finally changes. Sleeping had become a luxury I could no longer afford. Most nights, I stayed awake long after Emily's gentle breathing had faded into the silence of our small apartment, staring up at the ceiling as worry coursed through me. I would replay numbers endlessly in my mind: rent, bills, groceries, overdue notices, trying to find some glimmer of hope I hadn't yet considered. Sometimes I would get up and sit at our shaky kitchen table, sifting through piles of unpaid bills, quietly crying into my hands so Emily wouldn't hear. The darkness seemed to stretch on forever, broken only by the fear that somehow I was failing her. Stress began to invade every corner of my life. I forgot small things, leaving my keys in the fridge, missing a call from Emily's teacher, almost sending her to school on the wrong day for a field trip. My mind drifted at work, my eyes flickering too much at the computer screen, but missing a single shift was not an option. I couldn't afford even a brief moment of weakness in Richard Baker's ruthless world. Exhaustion settled in like a persistent ache. My appetite vanished. I forced myself to eat so Emily wouldn't worry, though most nights it was just toast and tea. On the bus home, my shoulders sagged under the weight of everything I tried to carry alone. Sometimes, I'd catch my reflection in a dark window and barely recognize the woman I had become. Dark circles under my eyes, a fragile smile, a heaviness in my eyes that no makeup could hide. Still, I made it my mission to shield Emily from the worst of our reality. Every night, I told fairy tales at bedtime, the kind where brave girls overcome wicked giants, or mothers turn hardships into happy endings. I held her hand tightly and whispered promises that good things would come, that even when life seemed scary, we would always have each other. More than anything, I didn't want her to think our struggles were her fault. But children are wise, sometimes wiser than we want to admit. One cold afternoon, I ran down icy sidewalks, heart pounding as I realized I was late, again, to pick Emily up from school. I scanned the crowd of parents and saw her sitting alone on the steps, clutching her little backpack to her chest. When I approached, breathless and apologizing, she looked up at me with a solemn, searching gaze. "Mama, are you going to be okay?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "I get scared when you look so sad all the time." Her words shattered something inside me, a pain deeper than any worry about money or work. How could I protect us from the world if my sadness was her enemy? I knelt down to hug Emily, fighting back tears. At that moment, I realized I could no longer afford despair. No matter the cost, I had to find a way to fight not just for our survival, but for her safety. That night, after Emily fell asleep, I sat in the dark, reflecting on everything I'd endured. Baker's harsh words echoed in my mind, reminding me how weak and useless I must have seemed to him. But for the first time, I pictured the determination on my daughter's face, the silent plea hidden in her question. Would I be okay? For her, I needed to be more than just okay. I needed to be brave, to show her that even when the world seemed impossibly cruel, we could rise up and demand better. I realized every hardship, every tear shed in secret, was building not just my pain but also a reservoir of strength. Somewhere deep beneath the exhaustion and fear, a spark of hope still burned. I decided that enough was enough. The next day, instead of shrinking from Baker's disdain, I began searching for answers. I researched labor laws during quick lunch breaks, took notes on everything I could remember about my overtime, and silently listened to the murmurs of discontent from coworkers who, in the end, faced their own struggles under Baker's iron fist. A solidarity began to form among us, the unspoken truth that we deserved more than crumbs. That it was worth fighting for ourselves. I still didn't know exactly how or when things would change. But Emily's question had ignited a flame inside me that Baker's cruelty couldn't snuff out. The world would keep turning, rent would still be due, and the marks left by years of exhaustion might slowly fade. But now, I was tired of letting hopelessness dictate my life. I decided to fight, not just for me, but for everyone who has ever felt powerless in the face of injustice. Somewhere in the steady rhythm of survival, we would find a way towards something better. And Emily, my sweet and perceptive girl, would know for sure. Sometimes, even the saddest stories can find a path to hope. One thing I've learned over the years I spent surviving is the art of hiding pain. But as the weeks went by, I started noticing small signs that I wasn't alone. Shame and exhaustion kept us silent, but late at night, in the break room or near the elevators, my coworkers' eyes would linger on my face a little too long, as if searching for the same answer I desperately needed. Were they scared too? Were they holding back tears in the bathroom, away from Baker's sight? It was Tom Harris who broke the silence first, Tom, who always brought his lunch from home to save a few bucks, leaving the office every night looking a little more defeated. One day, after yet another exhausting meeting where Baker reprimanded me in front of everyone, Tom found me near the vending machines. He didn't say much at first. He just stood beside me, watching the microwave spin. Then, in a whisper, he said, "I'm scared of losing everything, Jessica. But I can't take being exploited anymore. I know what's happening to you. It's happening to me too." Hearing those words, bare, true, and risky, opened something inside me. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't weak. I was living in a system designed to make us feel that way. For the first time in months, I felt a small spark of hope, because if I wasn't alone, maybe I didn't have to fight alone either. Angela Moore joined us soon after, her normally unshakable confidence now tinged with the same worry I saw in my own eyes. She was covering for another coworker's mistakes, forced by Baker to work double shifts without extra pay. Angela sat with us in the parking lot after dark, her voice trembling, but her determination growing stronger with each secret meeting. We all feared the same thing: retaliation, unemployment, losing the little stability we clung to. But worse still was the feeling that none of it mattered to anyone, that Baker could erase our efforts, our dignity, with a single ironic smile, and there was nothing we could do about it. Change came in the form of Susan Miller, a tireless labor rights advocate whose compassion was matched only by her sharp intelligence. Susan didn't look at me as if I were fragile, or as Emily's mother who couldn't get her life together. She listened carefully, nodded, and asked real questions about our time cards, hours worked, exchanged emails, sarcastic comments heard in meetings. Document everything, she insisted. Save emails. Take notes. If you can, record conversations, especially when he threatens or belittles you. What began as whispered confessions in empty office corners grew into a network of solidarity. Some nights, we met at a nearby restaurant, leaning over cheap coffee, passing our evidence across the scratched Formica table. Tom received emails in which Baker threatened to cut hours without cause. Angela kept a notebook full of wage discrepancies and meeting notes. I printed my overtime records, carefully backing everything up on a flash drive kept at home. I was never particularly brave. But watching Susan speak, her certainty, her calm dedication, I began to believe what we were doing was right. That I could be strong, not just for Emily, but for everyone who had ever felt small in Baker's world. As soon as we started sharing our stories, other coworkers joined us. The office, for the first time, buzzed with something beyond fear, a quiet hope. We weren't just Jessica, Tom, or Angela. We were a group, with voices that echoed louder than any of Baker's threats. Soon, Susan helped us draft a collective complaint, a class action. She explained that alone, Baker could eliminate us one by one. Together, our voices were unstoppable. The paperwork was filed, signed, and a tremor seemed to shake the office's foundation as rumors began to spread. We waited anxiously but resolutely, knowing what came next could change the rest of our lives. The news spread quickly. Baker found out, and his coldness reached a breaking point. Suddenly, he was less arrogant, more frantic, interrogating anyone who even glanced in my direction. Yet, not even his arrogance could stop what we had started. The news leaked to the local union, which demanded answers from the company. A young reporter from the city paper, her curiosity sparked by rumors of wage theft and workplace harassment, contacted Susan and met with me. She listened to my story, not as a victim, but as someone rediscovering her agency. When her article was published, exposing Baker's pattern of intimidation and exploitation, the impact was electrifying. Social media caught the wave and spread it. Support poured in, single mothers who had gone through the same thing, workers from other towns who knew exactly what it meant to be threatened by someone like Baker. There were hashtags, angry comments, stories of hope and resilience. Strangers stood with us. People I had never seen sent messages, "We stand with you." The world, which had once seemed so cold and futile, suddenly became full of possibilities. The old isolation gave way to something communal, a wave of empathy and outrage that turned our pain into purpose. Finally, after years of feeling invisible, we had the courage to stand up. And as the momentum grew, I realized we weren't just demanding justice for ourselves. We were showing Emily, and all the other children watching, that sometimes the bravest thing you can do in life is refuse to suffer in silence. That's how the real story began to change. After months of secret meetings and gathering evidence with Susan's help, a sober moment of decision arrived. We needed to act. I remember the gravity in Susan's voice as we sat around a sticky dinner table, all of us clutching our small piles of evidence: emails, timesheets, phone recordings, scribbled notes on scraps of paper. "Are you ready for this?" she asked quietly, looking at each of us. "It won't be an easy path. There may be backlash. But together, you are much stronger than you think." I couldn't sleep the night before the lawsuit. My heart pounded in my chest, and 1,000 what-ifs ran through my mind. What if we lose? What if Baker finds out and fires me on the spot? What if nothing changes and all of this was for nothing? But the memory of Emily's worried question and the silent exhaustion in Tom and Angela's eyes gave me courage in the dark. That morning, we had one last meeting before going to the lawyer's office. Each signature on the class action felt like an act of bravery, not just for us, but for everyone that Bakers like him had ever tried to silence. I gripped the pen tightly, thinking of all the overtime hours I had sacrificed and all the silent injustices I had endured, and I signed. The lawsuit began quietly, but with a growing sense of urgency. Susan rushed from meeting to meeting, deadlines tightened, and we spent hours reviewing documents and preparing our stories. There were phone calls, formal complaints, and tense HR meetings. I feared receiving a letter or call that would mean losing my job, but day after day, I kept showing up with my head held high. Then the news leaked to the company. Baker's reign was being challenged. The atmosphere in the office changed overnight. Colleagues whispered support in the halls, the union representative began showing up at building entrances, and reporters finally returned Susan's calls. For the first time, I saw real fear shine in Baker's eyes. Soon we received notification that the trial date was set. Reality hit us. There was no turning back. This was no longer just my fight. It was ours. The day of the trial arrived like a storm cloud hanging heavily over all my thoughts. For weeks, I was consumed by a mixture of fear and silent hope, fearing that all our courage and evidence would not be enough, but praying that someone, somewhere, would see the truth of what we had endured. The office where I spent so many exhausting nights felt like a distant memory as I entered that courtroom, surrounded by coworkers who had become more like family through that battle. We were no longer victims. We were fighters on the verge of change. The courtroom was cold and austere, every step echoing the weight of what was at stake. I sat rigidly, clutching my notes, my heart racing when the judge entered, a stern woman with a kind gaze who immediately made clear she understood the significance of the case. She spoke about protecting the vulnerable, highlighting the sacrifices made by women like me, single mothers dealing with impossible responsibilities and deserving to be respected and fairly compensated. When our lawyer began presenting the evidence, I felt a wave of vindication. The meticulously documented overtime, the emails with Baker's threats and insults were clear, the testimonies of my coworkers, all painted an undeniable picture of the company's wrongdoing. You could feel the scales tipping in our favor with every detail. Richard Baker sat at the defendant's table, his polished facade cracking with every new fact revealed. I glimpsed his pale face, tense jaw, eyes flickering between anger and disbelief. The man who once held all the power suddenly seemed small, diminished by the weight of truth. The judge did not mince words. She spoke firmly about the responsibility employers have to honor the work and dignity of their employees, reminding everyone that laws exist for a reason. Her voice carried authority as she condemned the relentless exploitation and cruel disrespect toward the people behind the paychecks. When the verdict came, time seemed to freeze. The judge ordered the company to pay every penny of the unpaid overtime, plus compensation for the emotional trauma inflicted on us. The total amount, an impressive sum exceeding $2 million, was more than just money. It was recognition. A declaration that abuse of power would no longer be tolerated. Richard Baker was removed from his position, and news of his downfall spread quickly. Suddenly, the man who once mocked and despised us became the target of whispers and scorn. His reputation, built on fear and control, crumbled before justice. For me, the victory was bittersweet but incredibly powerful. The wounds Baker inflicted didn't disappear overnight, but the healing had begun. With the settlement, I paid off debts that haunted me like shadows, dissipating the dark clouds that had lingered for what felt like an eternity. I found a small, cozy house where Emily could finally have a room of her own, not just a borrowed space, cluttered with boxes and hope. More than that, I enrolled Emily in a college prep program nearby. I wanted her to have opportunities one never imagined possible for myself. And I reached out to my coworkers, building support to help them rebuild their lives after the nightmare we had endured together. Looking back, I am struck by the brutal irony. The very man who tried to crush me with his cruelty ended up paying the highest price, not just with money, but with his dignity and career. Karma, as hard as it sometimes is to believe, showed up when we refused to stay silent. This victory was not just mine. It was every single mother forced to fight invisible battles, every worker pushed to the limit, treated as nothing more than a disposable cog. It was proof that when people unite, we can demand the respect and justice we deserve. Today, I wake up with a little less fear and a lot more hope. Emily still holds my hand on cold mornings, but now there is light in our home, a light no hardship can extinguish. I share our story so others know, no matter how dark the moment, courage can bring change. And sometimes, justice arrives like thunder, strong, unstoppable, and impossible to ignore. Reflecting on everything, the loneliness, the fear, and the overwhelming weight of uncertainty, I realize how much a person's determination can change the course of a life. For a long time, I thought I was small, just another face behind a desk, trying not to cause trouble. But I learned that when you fight for what is right, not just for yourself, but for those you love, you become stronger than you ever imagined possible. Never, ever underestimate a mother fighting for her child. There were moments when I felt lost, as if the odds were so high I could barely see beyond them. Moments when the temptation to give up gnawed at my resolve, when Baker's words haunted me late into the night, "You should be grateful to have a job." But it was Emily's innocent question, her silent hope, that reminded me what was truly at stake. I didn't win this battle because I had all the answers or because I was never afraid. I won because, at some point, I decided my daughter deserved a world where her mother would not be silenced or oppressed by injustice. I realized that, although karma doesn't always come quickly, it is relentless, it returns, sometimes in unexpected ways, and it reaches where it is most needed. The truth is, none of us is ever truly powerless. I hope my story reminds you that life's hardest moments are often where your true strength is forged. Sometimes standing up for yourself, as scary as it may be, plants a seed of courage in others too. Now, when I see the light in Emily's eyes, I know it is the reflection of hope, not the shadow of fear. So, if you're watching this and carry the scars of being ignored or mistreated, at work, at home, anywhere, know that you are not alone. There is always a way forward, even when you can't see it yet. And sometimes, the fight you start for yourself becomes the change that lifts an entire community. Never underestimate the power of standing up and speaking out. Karma may take its time, but when it finally comes, it is stronger and unstoppable beyond anything you could imagine. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever been through a situation like mine? Have you or someone close to you faced injustice at work and found the courage to fight back? Share your story in the comments below. I read every single one. And if this message touched you, don't forget to subscribe, like this video, and share it with friends or anyone who needs a little reminder that justice and hope are real. Let's keep this community strong. Together, we truly are unstoppable.